Let me hear whoop whoop. Historian caps on. By the middle of the 1700s, France and Britain each controlled a large area of North America, which bordered each other for thousands of miles. Each country feared the other and sought to increase the area it controlled. These ambitions collided on the frontier and eventually led to the French and Indian War. Native Americans lived on the land claimed by both France and Britain. The French viewed the Native Americans as partners and did not threaten to seize their land. However, the need of British settlers for farmland led to conflict between the British and Native Americans. By the 1740s, British settlers were pushing into the Ohio River Valley lands owned by the French. This soon led to trouble. In 1753, the French began building forts to back their claim to the land between Lake Erie and the Ohio River. This news alarmed the Virginia colony, which also claimed the Ohio River Valley. The governor of Virginia decided to send soldiers to order the French to leave. He chose a 21-year-old surveyor in the Virginia militia, George Washington, as their leader. The militia is a force made up of civilians trained as soldiers but not part of the regular army. Washington made the dangerous journey, returning home to tell the governor that the French had rejected his warning. The next year, Washington traveled west again, with orders to build a fort where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers meet to form the Ohio River. Washington arrived too late. The French were already there, building their own fort, which they called Fort Duquesne. Washington marched south for about 50 miles and built a small fort of his own. He called it Fort Necessity. Later, Washington's troops attacked and defeated a small French force. However, a larger French army arrived and forced Washington to surrender Fort Necessity. The French allowed Washington and his men to return home to Virginia with the message that they would never give up the Ohio River Valley. Expecting war to break out soon, the British government called a meeting of colonial leaders. It took place in Albany, New York. The British wanted the colonies to agree to cooperate in defending themselves against the French. The British also invited the Iroquois tribes to the meeting. They hoped to form an alliance with the Iroquois against the French. An alliance is an agreement between nations or groups to help each other against other nations or groups. The Iroquois refused to make an alliance, in part because they expected the French to defeat the British in the war. The colonial leaders tried to work out a plan to defend themselves. Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania believed the colonies had to succeed. To make that point, his newspaper, the Philadelphia Gazette, published a picture of a snake chopped into pieces with the warning, "Join or die." Soon after Washington's return, the British government decided it had to push the French out of the Ohio River Valley. In 1755, it sent General Edward Braddock to Virginia with orders to capture Fort Duquesne. Braddock arrived with a large force of regular British troops and Virginia militia. Colonel George Washington joined Braddock's force as a volunteer. General Braddock understood military tactics used in Europe, where armies fought in formation on open fields, but he knew nothing about fighting in North America. Braddock did not respect colonial soldiers. He did not listen to warnings that soldiers marching down a narrow road through a dense forest in red uniforms were perfect targets for an enemy fighting from behind trees and bushes. When Benjamin Franklin warned him about the danger of ambushes, Braddock said they were no threat to his well-trained troops. As Braddock's force neared Fort Duquesne in early July, it was ambushed by French troops and their Native American allies. More than half of Braddock's men were killed or wounded, with the general himself among the dead. The situation improved for Britain during 1757, when William Pitt became Prime Minister. Pitt sought top generals who had genuine military talent. He chose James Wolfe, who was only 30 years old when he became one of Britain's top generals. With Pitt's generals in command, the war entered a new phase. In the summer of 1758, Britain scored its first major military victory in the war. It captured the fort at Louisbourg. In the fall, the British took Fort Duquesne. The British renamed the fort Fort Pitt in William Pitt's honor. It later became the city of Pittsburgh. Quebec, the capital of New France, was located on a high cliff overlooking the St. Lawrence River. General Montcalm commanded the French defenders, and General Wolfe led the British attack. At first, the British made little progress. Then at night, they found an unguarded trail that allowed them to climb the cliffs, protecting the city without being discovered. In September 1757, approximately 4,000 British soldiers defeated 4,500 French soldiers on the plains in front of the city. More than 2,000 soldiers were killed or wounded in the battle, including both Wolfe and Montcalm. After losing Quebec, France could no longer defend the rest of its North American territory. Montreal, the other major French city in Canada, fell in 1760. In February 1763, Britain and France signed the Treaty of Paris. France lost almost all of its North American possessions. France ceded or surrendered French Canada to Great Britain. Great Britain also gained all other French territory east of the Mississippi, with the exception of New Orleans. Britain also received Spanish Florida. New Orleans, along with all French territory west of the Mississippi, went to Spain. Native Americans also lost a great deal. Without French help, the Native Americans could not stop British settlers from moving onto their lands. And that concludes the French and Indian War. This has been a Mr. Long production.